Hi, this is Phil Parrish from the Capes and Lunatics podcast, a proud member of the collective, and you're listening to Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast.
Hello, Looney listeners. You are listening to Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast. This is episode 72, and we have tonight a LUNAR-PICK modern run review. So we'll be looking at Moon Knight, Volume 7 by Warren Ellis, number 4, titled Sleep. And you're with your High Priest of Khonshu Rey tonight. Unfortunately, Connor has found himself, I guess, down in Mexico. He's on the run from a couple of Mexican wrestlers who are looking for his head, I guess. So Khonshu won't be with us tonight, but hopefully we will see Khonshu soon. Hopefully he manages to make it back safe and sound. So welcome, Loonies. Glad to have you with us. It's going to be probably a smaller, shorter show with just yours truly, but we'll try to cover all the main things. Now, as I mentioned as well, we are going to cover the Warren Ellis, Declan Shalvey, Moon Knight Volume 7, Issue 4, Sleep, and it actually has been covered already to an extent on one of our Isle of Ra sessions, and that was with Scott Weatherly of the 20th Century Geek podcast, and that can be found on episode 54 of ITK. So if you're keen to have a listen to that, just have a listen in our back catalogue. But anyway, Moon Knight issue 4 was one of Scott's Isle of Ra books, so we did touch upon it. It was the I think it came in at number 3 or 4 of his 4 books, so we did discuss it. We didn't discuss it in length, but we had a good yarn about it. So technically we have covered it already, but I thought it would be just good to, just tick it off and say that we've done the formal thing and give it a proper LUNAR-PICK modern run review tonight. So before any of that though, I've just got a couple of things by way of news, not so much news, I guess discoveries, and they're quite exciting in the Looney community. The first thing off the ranks would be the YouTube MCU film. This has been done, acted, directed, written by a fellow Looney by the name of Alex Lumen, and he posted up on our Facebook group that the film, his Moon Knight film, is ready for viewing. So it's actually up there on YouTube now. You can have a look for it yourself. A couple of the Loonies have already watched it. It is a fan film. It has a lot of dedication, a lot of passion put into it. But just bear in mind, it is a fan film. So it's an interesting thing. I've still got to go through all of it. I think it's a good part of half an hour. But it's if you want to see Moon Knight on screen, then this is one of the chances you can of seeing. I guess it's from what I've seen, a Mr. Knight, but there's also a kind of quasi Moon Knight, not so much in a cape, but definitely in a hoodie. So a bit of fun there. I'll put that in the show notes. Again, it's also in our Facebook group. Just check out the posts there. But very exciting stuff for any Loonies, and well done Alex and his team or crew for all the hard work that goes into making a film. I know for sure I've done a few student films back in the day at university, and there is a lot involved. So to come up with a half-hour film is pretty substantial. So well done again, Alex. The second bit of it, well, actually, I'm just kind of thinking there are actually 2 other bits of news. The first one I will shout out. I want to give a good shout out to the Capes on the Couch podcast. Now, I discovered these guys, I came across them only just this past week, And I have to tell you, Loonies, it is something you'd really want to give a go, particularly if you do love the likes of Moon Knight. Basically, what these guys do, and I have been chatting with one of the hosts, Anthony Sitko. The other host, I think, goes by the moniker of just Dr. Issues. So I don't know his real name, but there are two of them. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, and they combine conversation with superheroes and psychiatry. So basically, they've done a fair few episodes already. I've already listened to the Moon Knight one, which is really interesting. Anthony also happens to be another Amiga level loony. I mean, this guy has written a blog, and you can hear it on the episode when they talk about Moon Knight. He is really a really dedicated, a really passionate fan. I think he's got all the issues, much like a few of the other loonies that we've come across in the community. But he's also cosplayed as Moon Knight. He met Declan Shalvey and has managed to take actually quite a memorable picture of him pretending to break the wrist of Declan Shalvey. I thought it was quite funny. And Shalvey remembers Anthony from that day as a cosplayer dressed as Moon Knight. Anthony has also told me as well he's got artworks commissioned by Sienkiewicz and also David Finch, amongst others. So he's a real bona fide loony when it comes to collecting. But that comes across in the show. So not only have they done Moon Knight, of course, but they've done the likes of basically any character you can think of with a potential mental condition. So just off the top of my head, there's one of Multiple Man, which I can't wait to have a listen to. There's one of the Joker, of course. I think the first one that they did was of Eddie Brock, Venom. There's also Typhoid Mary. I don't think that they've done Scarlet Witch. I'd like them to do Scarlet Witch. I think that would be pretty cool. But I think the latest one currently is on Wolverine, which would make for a very interesting one. I mean, you could basically, I guess, pluck any character out and put them on the couch, really, and there'd be something interesting to talk about. But anyway, again, I will put this in the show notes. A shout out to Anthony. How are you going? Welcome to the Looney group as well. And thanks for putting out such a cool podcast. So definitely check it out, Loonies. It's well worth listening to. Well, that's about the news that we have for tonight. I think probably now what we'll do, I'll take this opportunity to let's go to a quick break, and we'll come back with our LUNAR-PICK review.
Hi, this is Chris.
And this is Brian.
And we are the hosts of Inner Demons, the Ghost Rider podcast.
And you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and other podcast apps for all your Ghost Rider needs.
Right on.
Yes, welcome back, Loonies. This is the LUNAR-PICK review for tonight. And again, beautiful music there by Delita. Thanks once again. Our custodian musicians who have supplied generously their original music for the show. Yes, and as mentioned at the outset of this episode, we're doing Moon Knight Volume 7, Issue 4. Because, of course, Khonshu has decreed it. It is a waxing crescent up in the sky. So if you cast your eye, if you're close to a window, have a look outside, you'll probably see Khonshu's eye beaming down at you. Well, it's a waxing crescent, so he's kind of like almost asleep or something, I guess. His eye is hardly open. But anyway, a waxing crescent determines a modern run review. And so we are doing, as mentioned numerous times, Moon Knight Volume 7, Issue 4, titled Sleep. Now, this is available in single issues, and I've checked as well. Apparently, there were no variants to this issue, but there was a second printing released on the 16th of July 2014. So for any collectors there who want to get every single sort of iteration of issues, there's a second printing of this. It is available on Comixology and on Kindle or Amazon. We'll supply a link in our show notes as well, which will take you straight to the Amazon Kindle site where you can buy it. Please bear in mind as well that if you are a Comixology user, if you do purchase it through Kindle, it is still compatible. So your comic reader will still, your Comixology comic reader will still pop up with the purchase that you have. Now, I mention this also because we are under a Amazon affiliate program. So if you do purchase it through the link provided, that would help the show very much indeed. So if you haven't got the issue, please consider it. Also available on Marvel Unlimited, of course. I think I did many rereads on Marvel Unlimited on a Warren Ellis run. And finally on trade, which is what I have got in my hot little hands now. And it is it's the first volume. It's titled From the Dead. So that's, if you're lucky, still available in comic book stores. Otherwise, I know online stores like Book Depository, I don't know, Barnes & Noble, or any other book sellers online will probably have it as well. If not, always just check out eBay or other second-hand sale sites. So, having said that, this was a very cool issue. And yeah, as for the sliver, I guess the best way to describe it is a dream researcher from Moon Knight's past comes to meet up with Mr. Knight because some of his staff or people that he's doing research on have been affected and have gone crazy, and he's asked Mr. Knight for some help. And Mr. Knight ventures into the research lab, finds a grisly discovery in one of the rooms, and the killer or the reason for all this madness is brought to light. So that's basically the sliver of this issue, broadly speaking. Now, this was a cracker of an issue, I must say. Typical with Warren Ellis's previous issues and subsequent issues. It seems quite short, and the ending is very abrupt. But one of the big things about Warren Ellis, and we've seen it in the other issues, is that he has a close tie, and he has a nod to the history of Moon Knight, which is really, I don't know, any loony would be appreciative of how Ellis has integrated this into the story. So a while ago we discussed issue 3, which was the punk rock ghosts, and there was a slight connection there with issues 31 and 32 of Moon Knight Volume 1 with the Savage Studs and the music box. So there was a little nod there from Ellis, and in this one here, there is actually a little nod towards, it's actually Marlene's brother, Dr. Peter Alrone. And as many of you know, Peter Alrone was heavily linked towards Morpheus and towards the Dream. Actually, Morpheus Markham was a patient, I believe, of Dr. Peter Alrone. And anyway, so Dr. Skelton is in this story, and he is or was an associate of Peter Alrone. And so there's a nice nod there right off the bat that there's a connection to Volume 1 of Mensch's run, which is really good. So, I'm just going to jump back and forth here because there are some great points here. So we find out, obviously, at the end, Skelton is the one that has caused this horrible crime, which has triggered, I guess, these spores to infect people's minds and dreams, and that's what Mr. Knight goes through as well. One of the great things here, I think, as well, is Mr. Knight in general is just really good in this, but I guess the level of violence is not really is shown too much in this issue. Well, actually, it isn't shown too much at all. So you only really see it where he actually wakes up from his slumber. He realises what's going on. Dr. Skelton believes that Mr. Knight has been possessed or is under the influence of whatever it is that has been affecting everyone in the building or in the research lab. But Mr. Knight has his wits about him, and so he busts through the door. He grabs Dr. Skelton and he just smashes him. And I guess one of the points here I wanted to say was there's no real grounded violence in this until that point. So it's actually has quite a big impact when you do see it, because you do see a lot of blood. Mr. Knight smashes Skelton's nose against the desk, then pulls him by the hair up and over the desk, and then slams him, and at the same time punches him into the ground head first. It's really quite a vicious act. I'm surprised he's still conscious at this stage. But then this is where it all turns, and when I say it's really abrupt, it's like 1, 2, 3. It's pretty much like 4 pages from the end of the comic that everything is just like bang. It just hits you straight away. So you get this violence from Mr. Knight. He smashes Skelton, and then he reveals under the floorboards of the room where he was sleeping, you see a corpse covered in some tarp, and in it is a dead man, but there is like a fungal growth coming out of his head, quite disgusting. There are rats everywhere around there as well. So what had happened, obviously, was this gentleman who died, he had a fungal infection in his brain, and he died in the dream state. And it seemed that he was kind of, we don't have to have everything explained, but he was kind of locked in there, I guess. So there's that bit, but there's also apparently spores flying out from this fungal infection that's coming out of his head into the air, and that was infecting people in the research lab, to the point where the violence is described by Skelton, so you don't see it, but at the very beginning he talks of how some of the researchers, what was it, she bit off her, I'm just trying to find the page, he goes, so all the researchers are in hospital because his subjects have gone crazy. He said one of them bit through her own fingers while asleep and didn't wake up from it. Once we got her to wake, she started screaming about needing to escape her own body. So they've kind of gone mad, and they get, it seems, quite violent, which is why Skelton believes Mr. Knight has succumbed to this, infection or come to be possessed as he understood it to be. But so it all comes kind of flooding towards the end, and I found that, again, a really good tool by Warren Ellis, but what it also does is kind of make it really abrupt, the ending, but you kind of get used to that, I guess, as you go through his 6 issues. So that's one of the big points. I'm going to bounce back now to the very beginning. So we get a lot of violent aspects of Warren Ellis, but there's also a really cool touch of humour as well. I mean, you only have to look at the first page. I love it, and I wish there was more of this in the Marvel Universe. I wish it pops up. Odenburger. It's a fast food joint. It's a burger joint, and it's obviously Viking themed, or even potentially Asgardian themed. And yeah, it's a really funny way to start off an issue, which is, for all intents and purposes, a really dark issue. But this is how we're introduced to Dr. Skelton. And anyway, you get a shot of the Odenburger. You get the staff behind the counter kind of dresses Odin with the eye patch and the Viking helmet. And one of them says in Old English, "Wouldst thou like Odin fries with that?" Pretty just quirky, funny humour. And then we see Skelton outside eating his meal before he jumps into the limo. And this is another point I want to actually bring, another awesome point. And I think we've discussed this a couple of times with Josh Geronimo Johnson, but it is Mr. Knight's limousine. Now, isn't this a thing of beauty? It was seen again, it's seen a lot. I mean, last issue 3, it's seen in issue 1 as well, and now again we have in issue 4. I'd really like to see more use of the limousine in subsequent Moon Knight adventures. It's just really cool. It's kind of like his hub, and especially when he's perched in that command control center seat, he's got all the controls around him. It's all stark black and white. The inside looks way bigger than a limousine should be, maybe just barely, but it's really good. It gives a sense of, I don't know, for Mr. Knight, I don't know, a bit of class and a bit of mystery as well to him. But anyway, so the limo is a good appearance in here, and this is where Skelton and Mr. Knight discuss basically the case, and it's a really good conversation, basically on the lines of how he knew Peter Alrone, and he spoke to Detective Flint, and the newspaper said that Mr. Knight actually speaks to Detective Flint. So this is how Skelton gets in touch with Moon Knight, Mr. Knight. And then he goes on to, there's some research jargon about dreaming, which he does, which he expounds to Mr. Knight, but says you probably don't understand any of it. But I love it how Mr. Knight says, I am precisely qualified. Dreamers are people who travel at night. That is my specialist subject. So he is absolutely not fazed at any technicalities. He's not overwhelmed by all this jargon that Skelton throws at him. He is supremely confident that he is the man for the job. And again, it's a nice portrayal of his confidence through Warren Ellis. I think it's very well done. Similar to all the other issues as well, we get that, as we've mentioned before with the other issues, we get that kind of cinematic introduction where you get the 4 horizontal panels on top of each other, saying Marvel Entertainment presents, and then you have flashes here of the title, and then the subtitle of the issue. It's probably a good time now here to mention the art. Now, of course, can mention yet again, Declan Shalvey's fantastic art and the beautiful portrayal of Mr. Knight. But I actually want to give props here to Jordie Bellaire. This was a monumental issue to colour. I can imagine it was a lot of fun, basically because of all this psychedelic imagery and hallucinations that Mr. Knight goes through when he's affected by the spores. And Jordie Bellaire does a fantastic job here. Now, I read somewhere as well that, I think it was maybe on Twitter, someone posted up one of the awesome images, and I believe it's the one where it is the almost crab-like beast. So you see Moon Knight, a small speck of Moon Knight in the foreground, taking on what looks to be like a mixture of a jellyfish, some mushrooms, a crab or some sort of crustacean. And I remember Jordie Bellaire commenting on this image, and she actually was, I guess, not disappointed, but she was she wished she would have done it another way. Like she said, I think she had a vision for how the colours would come together there, but it didn't really quite come off the way that she wanted to. I think it's great. It's a great splash page, and it works well with. I'm watching it. I'm looking at it in trade. It actually works well offset against the page next to it, which has Moon Knight looking at what seems to be these corpses flying through the air and a fiery sun. up in the distance. I think it works well because there are hues of orange and yellow in it. But that's not the only thing. It's all the preceding pages before that. It just seems like Bellaire just goes to town with the colours, and it's really, really nice to watch. It's certainly very different from the issue prior. So in issue 3, with those punk rock ghosts, there was a lot of like muted greys and greens for that, particular greens for the ghosts. This one, you've got really vibrant colours across the whole spectrum. So Bellaire uses blues and greens together, but she contrasts that heavily with like fluorescent kind of crimsons and magentas. It's really nice. So definitely worth noting the colours here, and of course the art by Declan Shalvey is brilliant. I mean, there are so many memorable images here. Of course, the first one, well, the one I'm looking at is with Moon Knight punching Skeleton to the floor, just saying "shut up," just with one fist straight down. We also have across the page him busting the door down with the door just splintering. Really many really great images. This ghastly image of when Moon Knight is in this hallucination realm or dream realm. We turn and we find out at the end, like we find out looking back, it's actually the corpse under the floorboards, his spirit, and he turns around and he's got mushrooms coming out of his eyes saying, "I can't sleep and I can't wake up." And so then that is a little hint of what's to come, and in retrospect you understand the context of it now. Really good stuff. And all these splash pages. Again, I'm looking at this other one, which really brilliant idea. I've got to call out the paneling here. Again, Declan Shalvey uses four panels stacked up on each other, like horizontal bands of them. The panels are broken up with what looks like a crescent moon, which I tend to think it is Moon Knight gliding around in a round. And you put these 4 panels together and it's a massive picture of, it just looks like a human skull with mushrooms and spores coming out of it. Really good. And again, a huge highlight for Jordie Bellaire's colouring there. Really good stuff. Also another good point I think is we do get to see, Warren Ellis gets to show us both Mr. Knight and Moon Knight. So we see Mr. Knight basically in the real world as he meets up with Skeleton and goes into the room and goes to sleep. But once he falls asleep and starts dreaming, he turns into Moon Knight. So for Looney fans, you're satiated by having both. You know, if you have a favourite, well, one of them's here. Oh, you know, both of them are here. You know, if you love both of them, then you know they're here for you. But it's really good to see. I do love the hooded Moon Knight myself. I love them both, but if I had to have a preference, I would prefer the caped Moon Knight. So it was good to see him in the latter part of this issue. He in the classic design by Declan Shalvey is simply awesome. I just keep on thinking of the Hasbro Legends figure, which is just an awesome figure, which I have on the shelf, and brilliant. So brilliant design by Declan Shalvey. So we get both sorts of Moon Knights there. Let me see if I have covered everything. So those are basically the main portions of this issue that I guess I really enjoyed. So having said that as well, I will give this, if we were to do a moon rating, I would give this a pretty damn good waxing gibbous. So that would be an 8 or 9 out of 10. I really did enjoy this. And for those that do know Ellis's run, oh man, there is a big one to come, issue 5, which is one of my all-time faves. But this gets up there as well. It's a very compact, a very thrilling story. Again, like with Warren Ellis, it's deceptively simple. The story, there's really not much to it, but it's just the way he tells it which makes it so interesting. And he's got such a strong team here with Jordie Bellaire and also with Declan Shalvey. It's just brilliant. So I'd give it a waxing gibbous for this issue. So loonies, check it out if you can. Now, also, I did forget just before the break. I guess we'll get to that in the into the spectacle. But anyway, well, here it is. We are at the spectacle now. So again, a shout out to the YouTube MCU. I think it's Marvel Fan Films channel. Go check it out. It is directed, written, starring Alex Lumen and a whole cast of others. A really fun amateur fan film. So if you want to see Mooney on screen, go check it out. The link will be in the show notes. Again, Capes on the Couch podcast with Anthony Sitko, and I hope that's your pronunciation, the correct pronunciation, Anthony. Please let me know if it's otherwise. So Anthony Sitko and his co-host, the psychiatrist Dr. Issues. That's on Capes on the Couch, a really good podcast. And what I forgot to mention as well was another podcast which I am absolutely thrilled to have discovered. They had been bandying around for a while, actually, ever since probably mid last year, but their podcast episode actually hadn't got off the ground up until, I believe it was like last week or the week before, and that is Tomb of Ideas, the Marvel horror podcast. Now, this is awesome. It's it focuses on obviously, as the title suggests, the horror titles of the Marvel universe. So they've already, the episode, the first episode that they've done, they've covered the likes of Morbius, the living vampire, in a Spider-Man issue, as well as Man-Thing. I think those were the two main ones. I can't wait, and I'm sure you can't wait either, for them to cover Werewolf by Night. I got in touch with one of the hosts there, and they will definitely be going through the whole run of Werewolf by Night, so that should be exciting stuff. We all know around 32 is where we get our boy Mooney coming in, so probably a while yet, but definitely should check out the prior issue reviews to that. So Tomb of Ideas, check that out. They're on Twitter. That's probably the best place to check them out first, or check out your podcast catcher. Just try Tomb of Ideas. Again, I'll have links in the show notes. Let me just chuck this in so I won't forget. Yes, so this is going to be a short one, loonies. Next phase, we have a waxing gibbous. So that will be a trade arc review. And this has actually been influenced from chats with Anthony from Capes on the Couch. We haven't done it yet, so actually I would be pretty excited to be doing the Scarlet Redemption arc from the Mark Spector Moon Knight run of the 90s. So this was largely written by JT Mateus. I hope it is JT, or is it JM? Let me just quickly check, loonies, because I would hate to be wrong. And now you can... Oh, I can't even find out. Okay, well, anyway... by Mateus, the Scarlet Redemption. It is I describe it as a very cerebral arc. It really does paint a ambiguous picture of Scarlet, stained glass Scarlet, and that's a good way. Saying that in a good way, she really does blur the lines of, does she love Moon Knight? Is she really his enemy? What's going on there? It really does blur what you make of it. I mean, I guess we'll get through the issues, but you could decide for yourself with her ultimate actions. But it's masterfully written by Mateus, so Look forward to that as well. I also have a note here, and we have actually done a little boo-boo to all you loonies out there. So what I've just discovered, and a big thanks to Orion Petitclerc for his spreadsheet on a catalogue of all Moon Knight's appearances and cameos and such. We, in a classic run, we actually should be getting into Doug Mensch's Moon Knight Volume 1 already. So we've actually gone ahead a little. The last classic run that we've done was Avengers 211. That was in 1981. Now, Moon Knight Volume 1, it was already released in 1980. So we're going to go back. Next classic run. It's not for a while yet, so just cast your eye up into the sky whenever it is a waning crescent. And yeah, we'll start looking at Moon Knight Volume 1, which should be a ripper. Can't wait to get into those issues. So we got there finally. In the end, really, really fun stuff. Okay, loonies. Well, that's it from me for this short, sharp episode. Again, you can find us on email at itkmoonnight@gmail.com. We have a blog site at intothenightpodcast.wordpress.com. We're on Facebook with a page, facebook.com/itkmoonnight, and we have a Facebook group. It is growing every day. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. It is facebook.com/groups/itkmoonnight. We have a Twitter account. The handle is no surprises at itkmoonnight. We are on Instagram, Tumblr, YouTube. Just search for Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast. And also just check all your podcast catches. We should be there in some capacity. If not, then we also have a link to our RSS feed, which you can just plug into your podcast catcher of choice. Finally, on iTunes, I would be forever grateful if you could leave us a review. If you could leave us a 5-star review, that would be even better. That would just help other loonies such as yourselves to find this podcast. It's always great to meet and interact with new loonies who've just come aboard. Each and every one of them bring different things to the group. It's just really fun. So we'd really love to get out there and spread the good word. So if you can leave a review, that would be fantastic. Okay, well, I think I'm going to be out of here. Thank you so much for listening. And as we always say, may Khonshu watch over the denizens of the night. Catch you later.
Moon Knight and affiliated characters, stories and events are properties of Marvel Characters Incorporated. Materials used and discussed within the podcast are intended for critique and review purposes only under the fair dealing concept of the current Copyright Act. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the copyright owners.